Well, welcome everyone. I'm excited to be here and I'm excited to have you here today to go through this webinar. This is going to be a great topic. I've very much been looking forward to going through this with you and making this honest comparison between A Place for Mom and Google Ads. They're such a hot topic and we talk about it all the time with our clients. And so hopefully going through this will help you make better decisions for you and be more informed about making those decisions. And just a brief introduction. I'm Jason Chagnon. I'm the CEO and founder of Homecare Marketing Pros. I've spent the last 10 years working exclusively with private duty home care agencies. So I love this topic and excited to have you here. So thanks for joining us. So this is our agenda for today, what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about first spend a little time on why this webinar exists. Why are we even talking about A Place for Mom and Google Ads? And then we're going to do an examination because I don't want to assume that you already know A Place for Mom and what Google Ads are. So we'll talk about what those really are and how each channel works, what they have in common, what they don't have in common. And then once we've established what they are, we'll talk about the pros and cons, the real pros and cons of each. Because what I hope you walk away with today is an unbiased view, an unbiased opinion of which ones are right for your agency, maybe both, maybe just one, but you'll be able to make an examination and maybe even hear things from me that a rep, like a marketing agency wanting to run ads for Google Ads, might not tell you or might not highlight. Or if you talk to somebody at A Place for Mom, maybe they don't highlight some of the cons. So I just want you to get a real unbiased view of those so you can make a good decision. And then we're going to talk about 3 differentiators that actually drive growth for you. So how do you get the most out of them? And then how do you maximize ROI? That'll be the last thing. And then we will take a few questions at the end. So I look forward to hearing your questions. So let's dive right in. First of all, why does this webinar exist? And I think that the real key question is, maybe this is why you came today actually, is how do I get a client? I mean, that's at the core of everything that you ask when you're looking at a lead gen, or like you're looking at A Place for Mom, you're looking at Google Ads, or you're talking to a marketing agency like Homecare Marketing Pros is, how do I get more clients? And I think depending on who you talk to, you get a lot of different answers, and common answers would be, well, we get our leads from A Place for Mom, or we get them from Google Ads, or you talk to somebody else and they say, well, SEO or word of mouth. Really, all of those sources are great sources for leads. But I believe we're asking the wrong question. The real question we should instead ask is, which lead sources are right for your home care agency? Which options are going to be effective for you? And so, as you probably know, there's millions of dollars spent every year on A Place for Mom, millions of dollars spent by home care agencies on Google Ads. And yet, how do you get a side-by-side comparison, a real neutral side-by-side? Which one should I do? Place for Mom, Google Ads. And so, like, as I said, every vendor is going to think they're the best. So if you talk to A Place for Mom rep, they might feel this is the only source you need for leads. If you talk to a Google ad agency, they might feel, well, this is really the best, most highest intent lead source. It's all you need is Google Ads. And so which one is right? Is there a universal winner? Is one better than the other? And as I said, there's no shortage of ways to get leads for your home care agency. So you want one that fits your vision, your team. And so today's goal, my goal for you, is just to give you straight answers, and it's backed by real data and backed by 10 years of experience working with home care agencies. And so why listen to this? I've already touched on it, but I don't want this to sound like a sales pitch. And by the way, if I sound like I favor one over the other, I don't. It would be just purely by mistake. I don't have a dog in this fight. We just want our clients to succeed. We want to see you succeed and get leads. So I'm not trying to steer you one way or the other. As I mentioned, 10 years exclusive in the industry. I've personally seen thousands of A Place for Mom leads come in. And our agency has spent millions and millions of dollars on Google Ads. So we've got a very robust view of both sides and what works, what doesn't. And again, just want to give you the real data so you walk away with the answers you need. So let's go into that first question, answering this first question. what is a place for mom? What is Google Ads? What are they all about anyways? So a place for mom. At the simplest term, yes, they get you leads. I would refer to them as a referral broker, meaning they're going to market to families that are searching for care. And then they're going to connect those families with the agencies in its network, essentially connecting them with their customers. And so during this process, a family is pre-screened by a care advisor before they ever reach your agency. So they talk to the care advisor at a place for mom, then it's sent to your agency. And now show on this slide here that you can see how you're listed. You're going to be listed along with other agencies, other competitors, and you don't have control over your placement on that site. But regardless of which home care agency they're looking at, when they fill out a form or call a place for mom will send that lead to you and other potentially your competitors, other agencies in your market. And so that way families are going to compare several agencies all at once. And the way a place for mom's business model works is that you pay per referral. It's not per client, it's per referral. So for each lead that they send you, each qualified lead that they send you, you pay for that. You've probably noticed too, if you spent time on Google or other search engines, that a place for mom ranks very high for the same terms that you want to rank for your agency. So searches like home care near me or caregivers near me or in-home care or elderly care, we could list hundreds of those high value terms. They're capturing the demand that you'd otherwise miss because they're at the top of those search results. And a place for mom, keep in mind, they're not exclusive to home care. They also refer families to senior living options. And so a lead might ultimately, even if they were looking at home care and even looking at your agency at a place for mom, they might be now considering other options after talking to a place for mom in senior living. So it's good to understand the role of a place for mom. It's a great resource for leads, but now you understand what it is. They show up in search, high intent search, they talk to the lead, and then we'll pass it on to their customers. Now, what's Google Ads? Well, again, this is intent-based search, but now you're paying to be at the top. So instead of a place for mom being at the top, you're trying to put your agency at the top. And I have an example here so you can look at it. It's probably familiar to you that if you're looking at a Google screen, you did a Google search, home care in Miami, you see at the top what are called sponsored results. And here in this one, you see home care in Miami, it's Caregivers of America. And if you click on that, you're brought to what's called a landing page, which I have on the right side of the screen there. So you click on the ad, now you're brought to the website of your agency, and that person will either fill out a form or call. So this is called paid search. Your agency appears at the top of search. And the way this works is you pay per click. So it's not pay per every time they see your ad, which is a great advantage, not to be overlooked, that your ad could show up thousands of times, be clicked on hundreds of times. So that's like a billboard. You drive by. It doesn't mean you're going to be a customer, but now you've heard of them, you've seen the brand, you've seen information about them. That has value, even though you're not paying for it, but you do pay for the click. If they click on the ad, come to your site, you do pay for that. And the results and getting the best results does require ongoing management, which is why there's ad agencies out there like ours as part of what we do to manage them, because it's not a set it and forget it scenario. So you need to manage your budget. You need to manage what you're willing to spend per day, the keywords you want to rank for, the keywords you don't want to rank for. You need to also optimize your landing page and measure conversion tracking. So there's a lot involved in the ongoing management of Google Ads to really get the most out of it. But again, these can be high value leads because it's intent based. You're being seen by people that are looking for home care. They're actively searching for it right now, and you're able to show up in front of them. So unlike a place for mom, you own the relationship right from the first contact. There's not a middleman. So they're not seeing it, calling a place for mom, then coming to you, having never heard of you before. They're calling you, having looked at your landing page. And so again, it's not to be, sometimes I think people are concerned about AI search changing this. It's really not. Search traffic for home care, whether it's on Google or AI search, is growing. It's significant and growing, and there's millions of monthly searches for the solutions that you provide. So as you could see, A Place for Mom is showing up on Google. Your Google ads are showing up on Google, both high intent searches. But both, this is an important distinction. I'm going to start on the right side with demand generation. Both A Place for Mom and Google ads are demand capture, not demand generation. So I'm going to explain what demand gen is. That's different entirely. This is what creates awareness in people that are not yet searching. So think of a billboard. That's the easiest one to see. Just because you're driving down the street and you see a billboard, it doesn't mean that you had intent to see that ad or you didn't have intent to buy what they were selling, but now you're aware of it. So you're creating demand. You can often see this in products that didn't exist before, like the iPhone. You probably didn't have a demand for a smartphone before it existed. You didn't know, so that awareness had to start first. Now, the downside of demand gen is it is a longer nurturing cycle, which means you're not really able to track your return on investment as easily. So, but the point that we're trying to make is it's not demand generation. Both A Place for Mom and Google Ads are demand capture. So this is people already searching for home care, already searching for a solution, and you're intercepting that existing intent. So that we could call them high urgency prospects. So because of that, there's a shorter sales cycle and it's easier to measure ROI. If I'm spending on Google Ads and people click, I can now tell how many of those become a client, and then I can tell how much revenue did I get for the ad spend. That's the beauty of marketing. That's the beauty of Google Ads and the beauty of A Place for Mom. But remember, neither one of them are helping you create demand. They capture demand that already exists. So let's walk through the journey just to put a real fine understanding on this of how these start the same way. So they start with a family searching on Google for home care. So let's go through A Place for Mom, that journey. The person clicks on the A Place for Mom listing in the search results. And what happens next? Well, they either call A Place for Mom directly or they fill out a form on the A Place for Mom website. Either way, whether they call or fill out a form, that person ends up talking to a care advisor at A Place for Mom. And it's that person that now talks to the family, screens them, asks questions, and turns that into now a referral with the data that they're going to email to your agency, and they're going to send that same lead to 3 to 5 other agencies that are probably your competitors. So they search on Google, they talk to a care advisor, that referral is sent to your agency, and then you call them. Obviously, you need to call them because it's coming into your email. And so does every competing agency. So that's why this is highlighted, this 5th step, fastest responder wins the client. I'll share more information about that later. Now let's walk through it again with Google Ads, same exact starting point in this journey. A family searches Google for home care. We've all searched Google. So this person is searching for home care and they see your ad on the search engine result page. They click on your ad. Where does that bring them? A landing page, your page. And they have those same options. They can either call you or they can fill out a form. And I'll tell you from experience that about 95% of the time, it'll be a phone call, not a form. So 95%, it'll be a phone call. And the nice thing is that this person is calling you. They've landed on your page. So there's no middleman again. They're just calling you, no competitors, and you control the relationship from the first touch. So that's a big difference between the two. So they start the same, but there's some key differences in this journey. So now that I've established for you what a place for mom is, how it works, what Google Ads is, what it looks like, how it works, let's talk about the pros and cons of each one. And start with the real pros of a place for mom. One is it's consistent and it's predictable, because if you tell them, I want 20 leads a month, I want 10 leads a month, that's what you're going to get. So that's a beautiful thing. There's not many other guarantees like that than just saying, yeah, I'd like 10 and you get 10. Now, another advantage of a place for mom compared to Google Ads is there's no active management, because a place for mom is handling the marketing. They're handling all of that. So you don't have to actively manage it. They just come to you. And then another advantage is about half need care within a month. So again, high urgency. They need care right away. This next one is a really big deal compared to Google Ads, is that they're pre-screened by a care advisor. So you're not talking to everybody that called a place for mom. You're talking to those that are qualified, meaning they were vetted for the services that they needed, the location, are they in your area, and the budget before they talk to you. That's a big difference between Google Ads, because Google Ads, you're going to talk to everybody, which means sometimes that's one of the cons of Google Ads that we'll get to. But now with a place for mom, you're just talking to qualified leads. And according to a place for mom, 62% of their leads expect to need care in the next 12 months. And according to a place for mom, their lifetime value, average lifetime value of a client is about $40,000. I think that's a bit high. The number I typically use is about 16,000, 15 to 16,000 lifetime value, but they say 40. So great, let's go with that. And this expands your footprint into search results you could never rank for organically. So yes, you could rank top at the top for if you ran a Google ad, but what about organically? Not sponsored. A place for mom and aging care show up in search results before you, typically. So you're able to get leads you wouldn't have gotten otherwise. Now, here's what it's probably not true what the rep won't highlight. I mean, maybe they highlight it. They're not going to really emphasize it for you, some of the downsides of it, but your lead is going to go to several agencies in your market. And even though they've talked to that lead, it's still considered a marketing qualified lead, not a sales qualified lead. Meaning you haven't talked to them yet, you haven't qualified them and brought them through your sales process. So you may not convert every single one. In fact, you're going to convert about 10%, industry average. And you're not going to control how you're presented to the family. It's up to them. So you can't control placement. You can't control how you're presented. So you're kind of commoditized in that way. And a place for mom also sells senior living. So you might feel like your main competitors are other home care agencies, but oftentimes your competitor is a senior living facility because they're weighing their different options there. Somebody could intentionally call a place for mom looking for home care, learn about the benefits of senior living, and now have that as an interest. So that even if they filled out a form with your name on it, so your agency is listed on a place for mom, they fill out that form, they can still end up talking to a senior living facility. So that's a downside, but that's happening anyways, whether you're using a place for mom or not. So there's not much you can do about it. Industry average conversion, 10%, meaning if a place for mom sends you 10 leads, you'll probably close one. Very easy to do the ROI on that, because if you paid $50 per lead, that'd be $500. And you close one, that means it costs you $500 to close a client. It's pretty easy math, and that's a pretty good return on investment, especially if you're getting 15,000 or more in revenue. And long-term ROI depends entirely on your intake process, because really all things equal, just assume all the leads coming from a place for mom are pretty much the same. So it's your process and your ability to influence whether you're getting a 10% close rate, a 40% close rate, or more. It takes intake discipline. Same is true for Google Ads. So Google Ads, the upside, you've got those high intent leads available. They're searching for home care in your market. You have full control over where that ad shows, what it says about you, what your landing page says. It's entirely yours, and it's exclusive. So if they call you, it doesn't mean they called 30 other people already. and it's not automatically going to 30 other agencies. You're getting to control that right from that first phone call. You own the relationship from day one. And it's also scalable. So you can increase spend if you want more leads. You can decrease or even stop if you want to stop it because capacity is tight, which is a great problem to have in some cases. And data visibility. I'm a data nerd. I love spreadsheets. So I love being able to see which keywords and ads are producing and which audiences are leading to the best leads for you. So that's a real pro. Now, the downside, what an ad agency may not tell you, again, these are marketing qualified, meaning they're expressing interest before they talk to you. But now your sales team, your intake team has to talk through that. And that's the number one reason why you might hear from people saying, we tried Google Ads, it didn't work. There's a lot of selling, there's a lot of conversations, I should say, that have to take place to go through maybe the 10, 20, 30 people that call to get that one actual inquiry, viable inquiry. So oftentimes I see that as a misunderstanding of like, oh, the ads aren't working because these calls are just all over the place. Well, rest assured, A Place for Mom is getting those same calls. They're just weeding through those. It does take time. So, and then results take time. It typically takes 60 to 90 days to optimize a new campaign. I won't get into why that is. But ultimately, because of Google Ads algorithm and it's measuring the performance of that, you have aligned interests. They don't want you to stop advertising with them. So they have a goal to really drive down the cost per acquisition for you so that you stay a client. But it takes time for that algorithm to recognize which ads they're running, what time of day, where, which ad copy is actually generating leads for you. But the conversion too, again, is entirely your responsibility. I mean, I'm listing it here as a downside, but that should be universally true. That conversion is your responsibility. Google is going to give you clicks, not clients. So everything has to be running the right way. And as I said before, you really do need an expert to manage your ads. I always say I could learn how to do my taxes. It doesn't mean I want to. You learn how to do Google Ads. It doesn't mean you want to. It doesn't mean you should. And so I just would caution you there that having an expert manage your money, because it's just so easy to waste money. So poorly run campaigns, I've seen it many times, poorly run campaigns that we do an audit on somebody's campaign and they're spending huge dollars on senior living keywords, which, I mean, it sounds nice, but the problem is they're very expensive. So things like that can really damage your campaign, drive your cost per acquisition up. And cost per lead in competitive markets is high. So you want to strive for low cost per click. But if you're in Miami or in Beverly Hills, areas that are very competitive, there's a demographic that needs home care. There's a lot of home care agencies. Those clicks are more expensive. And obviously, if you're not spending on Google Ads, then you're invisible. So you disappear immediately. So just to kind of summarize A Place for Mom versus Google Ads, just to do side by side. A Place for Mom, you're getting pre-screened referrals. You have predictable monthly volume. However, it is shared with competitors. There's no ad management needed. That's great. And you have a 10% industry average. So maybe you could do better than that. But honestly, even getting 1 out of 10 is a really good metric. And according to A Place for Mom, very high lifetime value per client of $40,000 or more. Now, again, Google, highest intent searching now. That's true also with A Place for Mom. It's scalable to your capacity. I do not recommend spending less than $1,000 a month on Google Ads. There's a reason why I say that. If you run the math, basically under 1,000, because of the ratios of how many impressions, clicks, phone calls, inquiries, conversions to care, if you spend too little, you're going to get zero. So easily I can say, if you spent $500, you might as well spend zero. That's probably an oversimplification, but it is scalable to your capacity, but don't go below 1,000 and don't run them for less than 90 days. The leads are exclusively yours, but it does require management, and conversion, as in any case, is fully on you. So, what are the three differentiators that actually drive growth for these? Because we've talked about these as lead sources. They're both essentially getting families to come to you through a Google search. So they're the same families that either choose to click on an ad or they choose to click on a place for mom and talk to them. So what are the differentiators that are going to drive growth in these scenarios? Well, first, I'll just say there is a deeper issue here in choosing, and it's usually not a lead source problem. Most owners, and yes, most owners blame the lead source when conversion is low. That is just not accurate because the data tells a different story, but this is really actually good news because you have so much more control over the outcome than you may realize. I mentioned before the industry average is 10%, meaning an actual inquiry for care that you would convert 1 in 10. Even through Google Ads, yes, you'll talk to 20 people, but you'll narrow that to 10 inquiries that are viable inquiries. You'll convert one of those. But yet, top performing agencies convert 40%. So that's a gigantic gap, a 30% gap, same lead source, different results. And so fixing intake and becoming a top performer in an intake process can really drive down your cost per acquisition with no extra ad spend. So I can't emphasize it enough that what happens after you get that lead is the most important thing. And I say this a lot, agencies aren't losing leads, they're abandoning them. So I just want to highlight this point, I guess, before you spend money on either of these sources. Make sure you don't have this leaky bucket syndrome, I call it, where you've got leads coming in, but they're just leaking out the other side and you don't realize it. So you're thinking, well, I just need to spend more on ads and up the amount of leads that we're getting when it's actually not necessary. So here are the three failure points, and none of them are the lead source. One is response speed. So 5 minutes to respond. And why do we talk about response speed? Is because when we monitor calls for home care agencies, we know they're missing 50 to 60% of their calls. That's just average. Home care agencies, your phones are very busy. You know that. And so calls get missed, they get mishandled. And because of that, even when somebody leaves a message, the response speed is slow. 5 minutes is the benchmark. That should be the goal. The other is after hours coverage. 44% of inquiries come in after 5 p.m. A Place for Mom supports that. They know it as well. So think about that. Almost half of the inquiries come in after you're probably closed. So that's another failure point. And then another big one, super important, is follow-up cadence. Honest self-examination here. When you get a new lead and you talk to that person, how many more times do you talk to them before giving up? You should continue to call them until they tell you basically to never call again. You should continue to follow up. Most are going to follow up 1 or 2 times. Some follow up 0 times because as they have that conversation, they think, well, they're just shopping on price or they're not quite ready yet. They'll call us when they're ready. They're considering other options. That is not how you close a deal. That's a failure point, is not having a follow-up cadence. So let's talk more about response speed. I said 5 minutes. If you talk to that person within 5 minutes, you're 21 times more likely to convert that into a client. Now, industry average response time, believe it or not, is around 48 hours. How is that possible? But it is the industry average, and 27% never get a call at all. So they either call after hours and leave a voicemail or don't leave a voicemail. But yet these families are emotionally triggered. If you think about, let's forget about home care for a second. Let's imagine that your toilet's leaking. okay, and you call a plumber, how long do you want to wait before you call the next plumber? Because it's urgent. So you're not thinking, well, I did leave a message. You're going to call the next plumber. You're going to keep calling. And that may be like overstating it, but these are urgent. So they're emotionally triggered. Delays mean lost revenue, lost opportunities, and can even mean damage to your reputation, because someone might say, yeah, I called Caring at Home in Sarasota, but they didn't call me back, or they called me back 2 days later and I'd already found another solution. It's not a story you want told about your business. And now consumers, 82% expect a response within 10 minutes, but only 37%, this is just business, small business in general, 37% of businesses respond within the hour. So the statistics don't lie. And yet all this money spent on getting leads, this one is pretty critical. 78% of people buy from the first company that responds to their inquiry. So if you want to really simplify your life and your brain about why you're not closing leads, 78% buy from the first company that responds. So you might be thinking about, how are we different? How do we compete? How do we tell our story? What's the most critical piece is response speed. And so really the best practice is to respond within minutes, even after hours. After hours coverage, as I said, 44% of inquiries arrive after 5, but 85% of callers who reach voicemail don't call back. So that's a major issue. And there are solutions to that. So I'd like you to think about, what can you do to have after hours coverage? I don't advise just being on call 100% of the time, because you'll burn yourself out. But there are solutions that can drastically increase your likelihood of closing a client, handling it well, delivering on your promise of better service even after hours. So think about that statistic, that almost half of them are going to come in after hours. And then the follow-up cadence. So industry standard, 1 to 2 follow-ups, sometimes 0. About half of all referrals need long-term nurturing because they're in research mode. So what are you doing to capture the value from those leads you've already paid for, if they truly are looking? And maybe it's 2-3 months ahead, which you love that. You love it when somebody's planning, because you have an opportunity, you have more time to plan with them. But are you following up? Are you keeping in touch? So best practice is 1 to 2 touches a day for the first few days, trying to get a hold of them, and then set a cadence for yourself to make sure you follow up. But remember that statistic, 80% need at least 5 follow-up attempts before they convert. So if you're giving up after that first phone call and just leaving it on them, that's why I say you're abandoning them. You're not losing them. So where do you actually lose revenue? Number one spot is the top of funnel. Calls missed or mishandled is by far the largest source of revenue. And we have this conversation a lot at Homecare Marketing Pros, because we're being hired to help generate more leads. But our first question is, this is going to work? The question is, are you prepared for handling those leads? What's your intake process like? Who answers the phone? How are you tracking those leads? It is so important, because it's the number one failure point, is the intake process. That's where revenue is lost. That's where you start to feel like marketing is an expense. It's not providing return on investment. It's because you have this leaky intake process. But yet, think about this. Once an in-home assessment is scheduled, agencies close 80% of that. So the gap between a new call, a new lead, to a qualified inquiry to an in-home assessment is where things drop off. Once that in-home assessment happens, it's 80%. So 4 out of 5 become your clients. So intake process is the most important asset for you. It's the first time that you're able to deliver on the messaging you've been sending. If you've been saying you're this compassionate agency, you're knowledgeable, you're the experts, as soon as they talk to you, that's what they have to hear and understand. And so often that's a failure point because of missed and mishandled calls. And remember this, I put this slide in just as a reminder because I do hear this a lot. And there's different marketing agencies, branding agencies, story agencies that talk about how you have to tell your story. And I know you feel that because there's so much competition in home care that you need to tell your story and tell how you're different. And that's true, but the timing matters. It's not at the top of the funnel. It's not in that first call. Later in the process, perhaps in the in-home assessment, that's when you can demonstrate your story, why you're different, being prepared for that question. So I've really enjoyed this visit, but how do I choose between you and another person? That's when your story may matter. But families don't care about you. They care about themselves and their problems. So all this competition makes you want to tell that story, but I'll use the plumber example again. If you have a leaking toilet, you're not thinking, well, this one won awards, and then when you get them on the phone, they want to start with their story, who they are. It's second generation, they've been in town for 20 years. Nice, but you have a problem you're trying to solve. So if they're friendly and they're experts, you're 90%, 95% decided. 78% buy from the first company that responds. And so if you sound trustworthy, act like the expert, control the intake process and guide them, then really what you're doing is making a reality out of who you believe you are. And you can see hopefully how this is so applicable to A Place for Mom and Google Ads, that if you just take those out of the equation and think about these are real people going to Google and doing a search, then sharing private information, or they're ready to share private information. How are you handling that? That's where the real differentiator comes in. So how do you maximize ROI? We're going to get into some numbers now, some data. But I just did want to share this with you because I'm seeing this a lot in the conversations I'm having, especially when it comes to AI and the use of AI in the business. There's so much information and focus on the back office, scheduling software, payroll, billing, electronic visit verification, HR onboarding. Those are back office functions completely underinvested in the front office, which would be client intake and conversion, response time, after hours intake, referral partner activation, developing referral partners, following up, and then even caregiver recruiting as a front office. So stop over investing in the back office, start investing in that front office, because that's where your revenue gap lies. And you can't manage what you don't measure. And this is a well-known stat in the home care industry, but it applies to really any industry. It would just be a different dollar figure. But the agencies that track every inquiry make $1 million more a year than those that don't. Now, obviously, tracking an inquiry doesn't magically make you more money, but it does allow you to address your weaknesses, your bottlenecks, and that's what drives that growth. So most will know their lead volume, but you don't know your cost per start. You don't know the source, and you don't know it in real time. So you're not tracking those. And what agencies might find out is some of their most high volume lead sources are actually a waste of time, a waste of money, bad ROI, or they have low lifetime value. So let's look at the math now. I'm going to skip right to the real math on a typical account for A Place for Mom. We're going to use $1,000 spend for A Place for Mom, $50 per lead. So that would be 20 leads. And the industry average, as I shared, was lead to client is 10%. So that gives you an average lifetime value of 40,000 they shared. I'm putting a lower number here, industry lifetime value of $15,990. But if we just back up, this is the important number I want you to remember. $500 cost per acquired client. So if you're spending $1,000, you have 20 leads, you close 2, that's going to be $500 per lead. So that's $500, and then revenue could be 16,000. So that's your return on investment, lifetime return on investment over 3,000%. So that's the real math. And I'll actually include a link at the end of this in the notes for you that you can use our live calculator. I also have a live calculator for the Google ads, the real math on $1,000 with Google ads. So monthly Google ads spend, we're using that same figure, $1,000. Cost per click, between 7 and 15 should be your goal. Like I said, if you start to drift into senior living, these can go to $25, $30, even $50 a click. Aim for a range between $7 and $15 a click. So let's say that this campaign at $1,000 a month averaged $10 per click. So it generated 100 clicks. 100 clicks, how many of those clicks turned into phone calls or form fills? Not all of them, 7%. 7%. So you got 100 clicks, you got 7 leads, then lead to client 15% as a benchmark with strong intake. So 7 leads, 15%. You get a client, cost per lead is $143, cost per acquired client is $952. So remember that $500 for a place for mom, $952 for Google ads. So cost per client, much higher on Google ads. Why would it ever be worth it? Well, remember, with Google ads, you talk to a lot more people. You are seen by thousands of people. If you've set your campaign up right, you've collected all of their information. Now they're getting long-term nurture emails from you, and they're staying connected with your brand. So the chances of you lowering that cost per acquired client, lowering or increasing the ROI on that $1,000 is very high. So it's not really apples to apples, but it's something to think about, that cost per acquired client is 500 with a place for mom, almost 1,000 with Google ads. Well, Google ads is a multi-billion-dollar business. Google ads is still the one revenue source for them. So why would anybody do that? Why does anybody run it, not use a place for mom if it's less? That's what I was trying to answer for you, is that there's a lot more residual value and byproduct that can come out of that ad spend. So which channel fits your operation? There's no universal answer. It's really becoming educated about those two sources and deciding for yourself. Maybe you want both. Maybe one or the other. It depends on where you are in your process of growing your agency. So choose a place for mom if you want that predictable lead volume. You don't want to run ads. You have a great intake process, and you can handle competing on that speed to lead. Because remember, those leads are going to go to multiple agencies. So when you get that lead, it comes into your email inbox. It cannot just sit there because somebody else is going to call them. Now, use Google ads if you want exclusivity. You want to be the first and only brand that they interact with, but you need proper management and you're ready to optimize those ad campaigns and landing pages and your intake process, and you can handle that ramp up period. Sorry, I just needed to do something on my screen. I think it was going to time out on me. And then use both if your intake is strong enough to handle volume from multiple sources. You're tracking ROI by source. Why do I say if you're tracking ROI by source? You always want to know which one is operating the best, because if you do need to make changes, you want to pull the lever or pull back, it's best to know which one is the one to choose rather than guessing. And start with neither if your response time exceeds 5 minutes or your cadence of follow-up is fewer than 5 touches. So I just want to repeat that you may be feeling the strain. We need leads now. Don't spend a dime until you're really confident about your intake process. You're answering the phone, your team, whoever's answering that call, because that's where things drop off. 6 numbers to help you decide your growth. We've already touched on all these, but 21 times more likely to convert to a client if you respond in 5 minutes. 78% of people buy from the first company that they talk to. 44% of inquiries come in after 5 p.m. 85% of callers that hit voicemail don't leave a message. 80% of leads require 5 follow-ups, and agencies that track every inquiry make $1 million more. Those are awesome statistics. I don't obviously expect you to remember them, but if you really think about those numbers, they all point to the same thing, which is that you need to track your data and understand your systems. I love both the Place for Mom and Google Ads. I think they're great sources for home care agencies. I do think they get a negative rep from people saying that those leads just were no good. That's not really the case. It's just a matter of how are you tracking the data? What's your process like? And I hate to say it, but sometimes the people that are telling you that they're not working have a vested interest, because if you're not the one answering the phone, say you're the owner and you have an intake person, you say, why aren't we getting leads? It is easy for them to say, well, the leads that are calling are just not that good. Did you verify it? Did you listen to the call? Are you aware of how they handled the call? How many times they talked? How long it took to call them back? Because if you don't know all that, you're still just kind of assuming, oh, the leads were bad. Yeah, I guess a Place for Mom is no good. A Place for Mom wouldn't be so successful if their leads weren't good. Google Ads would go out of business if their ads didn't work. And yet, here we see millions of dollars spent just on home care ads alone. So be cautious about accepting that as the premise that, oh, the leads are just bad. And plus, isn't it more acceptable? Isn't it easier in your thought process to think this is a fixable problem? Because if it's us, if it's our intake process, we can improve. So I'm just going to leave you with these 4 actions that you could take this week. Call your own agency after hours on a weekend and try to really experience what a family experiences. Keep track of your next 10 inquiries. Like, really keep track of them. Where did they come from? What time? How long did it take you to respond? How did it go? How was it handled? If they hit voicemail, it's not good. So fix your after hours coverage. Try to strive for that 5-minute response goal. And I'll just leave this in the slides. This is our growth system from Homecare Marketing Pros. It's called Care Funnels, and it helps you do all the things that I've talked about. You don't have to use Care Funnels, obviously. The important thing is understanding what these lead sources do, how they work, how you get the best return on investment, what the pros and cons are. And then obviously, you do need a system to track all of these things. It's not about hiring more people. It's about automation and being more efficient. So now we have some time for your questions that I look forward to seeing. Let's see. And if I don't get to your question, feel free. I've got the email here, but you can email me directly, jason@homecaremarketing.com. You can use that address on the screen to hello@homecaremarketing.com. But if you do jason@homecaremarketing.com, I will get it and I will respond. And it looks like, okay, well, I have a couple questions here. So one, I've been using a Place for Mom for a few months and I'm not seeing results. Should I just cancel and put money into Google Ads? Yeah, so I would compare the benchmarks. So when you say you're not seeing great results, I'd want to know what that means. I mean, does it mean you haven't closed any, or you closed the industry benchmark of 10%? But before you switch, so the question, if I understand, you're saying, should I cancel and then use Google Ads instead? Here's what I'd say. Answer these questions. You're probably sick of me saying it, but what is your response time? Are you covering after hours? How many follow-ups are you doing? Because what could happen is somebody that cancels a Place for Mom and then starts doing Google Ads, you see the exact same results because it wasn't the lead source. It wasn't actually the vendor that you were using. It was you, which is good news. But I would caution you to really evaluate when you say not getting great results. What does that mean? And then why? Why? So ask those questions. Thanks for your question. Appreciate it. And then let's go. We've got time for one more. We already have a pretty good response time. We call them back within a few hours. Isn't that good enough? No. Well, no, it's just not. Pretty good response time, a few hours. I would not characterize that as good response time. Remember my example of the leaky toilet. I mean, maybe it's not that urgent, but The truth is when somebody is making a phone call and they're not familiar with you, they're really not going to wait. So if they do hit voicemail, or commonly maybe they talk to the scheduler, they talk to somebody at the front desk and they say, well, our care manager is busy, so can you leave a message? That's a real issue because if they're not familiar with you, they're just going to call another company. So a few hours is just not good enough. If it's a place for mom, it's definitely not, because everybody is taught when you get that lead from a place for mom, you need to call within 5 minutes. So a few hours is like not responding at all. And they've probably already talked to the 2 or 3 other agencies. So kind of like a mental model, I guess I would say, that you could use is that for every hour you wait, you're paying more for a customer, because if you convert 50%, now you're going to convert 10%, which means your cost per client is just going up. So the longer you wait, the more expensive things get, if that helps. So then that puts a fine point on your question. If I'm understanding, we call them back in a few hours. Yeah, that clock ticking is money, really. And worse, I worry about this, like, because you want good reviews. Somebody calling you that doesn't get a response or delayed, they may repeat that to other people and say, yeah, I did call, but I didn't hear back. So be careful about that. But great questions. Thank you, everybody. This has been great. I hope you learned a lot from it and found value in it. And feel free to send me an email. I'd love to hear your feedback. And like I said, if you have other questions, I really enjoy hearing your questions. I learn. I want to be helpful to you. So thank you again for joining us this afternoon, and I'll see you in the next webinar.